When I was 34 years old, so roughly 10 years ago, I was diagnosed with dyslexia. And for you guys who don't know what dyslexia is basically that you have a really hard time both with reading, writing, and spelling especially has been my problem. Now I know there are some variants of dyslexia out there. All my life I've been pretty good with numbers, so that hasn't been my version of dyslexia. I think it's called dyscalculia or something like that. But when I got the diagnosis, it was of course a big relief for me because I really understood for quite a long time that my spelling was horrible, and I still today spell really badly. I mean, I could spell the same word in a sentence in 3 different ways, which is kind of crazy. And well, that has always been my reality. But for me, I've never thought at it's something bad that I didn't get to know that I had dyslexia until I was 34. On the contrary, knowing myself when I was younger, I would probably use it as a crutch or as a reason to why I wouldn't do stuff. So I'm actually really happy for me not having that reason to not try and do better and stuff like that. The funny thing about all this is also that in school, from like first grade up like into high school or gymnasium here in Sweden, it's basically when you turn 18 or 19 where you quit that. I've always had quite okay grades, and that's quite funny. And I've always been quite good in like taking in information and reciting it, so my memory is probably quite good. However, every time when it came to writing stuff, I was so bad. But in some way, I actually, for some strange reason, I always got through and got quite okay grades. But I know that a lot of my teachers from then would tell me or like write comments on my test that okay, wrong spelling here and here. So that was very common for me. Also for me, I remember when I was in the 3rd year of gymnasium, I was reading in a classroom. I had something called hemspråk, which is like where you go and learn the language of your parents. And I'm Albanian, so I was in this Albanian class. And this class was the only one in gymnasium where we actually had reading for the whole class, like out loud, which, I mean, it's so basic. So I mean, in other subjects we would never do this, but I remember me having such a tough time. Now I would think, okay, it's Albanian and it's very hard to read, which, I mean, it isn't so much harder than anything else, but still I remember really being ashamed of not being able to read. And in that particular class, I was the only boy. So I was there with like 30 girls, Albanian girls, and only me and I would stutter so much while reading. And at the time, I wouldn't think that it was dyslexia or anything, because I'm not sure I knew what dyslexia was at that time. I was just like, am I nervous? Is this really hard? And I would also look at the other Albanian girls as well, they probably have learned how to read Albanian at home, which I hadn't. I also remembered when I was in uni and I was with some friends, and we were like camping outside one night, and one of the friends, she took a book and started to read it out loud, and it was such a great moment. And then she gave the book to somebody else, and after a while the book went around. But I remembered that I didn't want to have the book. I just was like, oh, I'm not really feeling it. It's okay if I don't do it. And then I knew that I had some kind of, that I at least knew that I didn't want to read in front of other people. So that's very interesting. Now, if you're asking how I actually came about to to check out if I had dyslexia was when my daughter was 6 months old. We started to read to her, and we read for like 8 years or 9 years, almost until she was 10 years old, every evening. I remember we missed one evening of reading for my daughter, and it was quite a huge thing, and we were traveling or something. I don't remember but it was such a huge thing that we didn't read that night. But it was actually my wife who because we were like reading every other night. So one night my wife would read, and the other night I would read aloud. And we're talking about children's books, like for toddlers. And my wife noticed that I was really struggling with reading the books out loud, and she was like, "Shouldn't you go and check that out, because you're having quite a big problem with reading these toddlers books?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure, I'll do that." And I went and I did a lot of tests, and I would say that the tests were quite confusing. And I'm not sure, you could probably fool the test by just not applying yourself. The strange thing here was that I was applying myself, and still I didn't pass, which basically means that I had dyslexia. So I got these strange codes, and she was like, "You have this type of dyslexia." And I was, okay, cool. So I was 34 when I found out, but that was the way I found out. But as I said in the beginning of the video, is that I'm actually quite happy that I didn't know that I had dyslexia until I was 34. Now I know that I have a couple of friends that have known for a longer time than me that they had dyslexia, and they would get a lot of aid in school. They would like get books that they didn't need to read, but they would listen to them. I know that they would get more time at tests because they had dyslexia. And of course, I would probably do better on the test, but I mean, for me, I still had quite okay grades. I didn't have like everything top, but I was like quite okay in my grades. So yeah, that's my story in how I find out myself that I had dyslexia. So I'm not sure that it is interesting to anybody else, but it is to me. Now, one thing that has helped is that once I did know that I had dyslexia, I actually started reading a little bit more with intention. Before that, I would just read and just fly through a page as fast as I could, and I probably missed half of it. What I did after dyslexia was that when reading the children's books, and that helped a lot. I mean, reading children's books every night, my reading is so much better than it was 10 years ago. But what I did was that I was reading with an intention. I took it a little bit easier to actually pronunciate the words and actually understand what the words were meaning. And my dyslexia, when it comes to reading, has actually become so much better. Now, when I read aloud, I don't think actually people understand that I have dyslexia, which is quite interesting. But when it comes to my writing, still today, as I said in the beginning of this video, when I write, it's so interesting that, I mean, if I write like half a page and I have the same word in 3 different places, sometimes I spell the words in 3 different ways. So that's something that I still struggle with, but honestly, I don't care too much about it. Another thing that is quite funny is that I'm kind of a university teacher. I'm not sure what it's called in other places, but in Sweden it's folkhögskola. So I teach marketing, and I teach videography and photography. And it's so often that my pupils are like grown people, and it's so often they remark on my grammar, on my spelling, and especially when I write something on the whiteboard, which I try to not do, but sometimes I have to do it. And it's so often that I misspell, but then I only laugh it away and I tell them, well, I got dyslexia. You know what? You're probably the only students with the teacher that has dyslexia. And then we make fun of it, and then it becomes like a joke. And I don't feel bad about it, so it's not a big deal for me. But it was very interesting to actually know that I had it when I was 34. And now that I know it, I actually use it as a crutch sometimes, and my wife makes fun of me, but that's a whole different thing. If my kids today would have dyslexia, I would probably sit down and read with them very often, because I know that that has helped with me. Now, of course, people have different kinds of dyslexia, so that will probably vary how you treat it. I'm not an expert with it, but my kids are right now 15 and almost 12, and they definitely don't have dyslexia. They're very good in reading and writing, so that's not going to be a problem. One interesting thing that I remember from growing up is that when I was maybe at 20, and I probably started uni already, and I have a sibling, Bleurat. He's 9 years younger than me, almost 10 years. And the funny thing, when we would read like a web page together, he would like just scan the page so fast. And he's very fast at reading today also. And he's probably one of the faster readers I know. But still, it was so almost humiliating to know that my brother, who was 9 years younger and was like 11 at the time, 10 at the time, he would scan a page, and I would like wait for like 1 minute more to just read the page. And sometimes I would be like, did you actually read the page? Yeah, of course I did. And I would quiz him on what the page was all about, and he would actually know it. So that's a little bit funny. So yeah, that's my story with dyslexia. As I said, I'm very happy that I didn't know until I was older. I would love to know in the comments if you have a story with dyslexia and how you dealt with it, and when you knew that you had it, and yeah, if it's been a hard time. I think of one of the Lannisters in Game of Thrones. I know that the blonde, beautiful brother, the tall one, Jaime Lannister, he talks about having problems with reading and writing, and where his father, Tyrion Lannister, would make him sit in his room until really, really got it. So that's dyslexia. And he says in Game of Thrones that in the end he actually learned quite good. So he could probably help just to sit with it. So maybe listening to audiobooks and having extra time. I'm not sure I'm not a doctor, but I'm not sure that it actually does the students a favor. Maybe just hard work could teach your brain to read better. I'm not sure. What the fuck do I know? What the hell do I